Did you know there are people who effortlessly get others to feel drawn to them like a magnet? It's not luck, it's not chance. These are specific habits that anyone can master. In the next few minutes, you're going to discover exactly what makes certain people absolutely irresistible. And the best part is, it doesn't require changing your personality or pretending to be someone you're not. Most people believe being attractive is about having the best physical appearance or saying the smartest things, but the reality is completely different. Neil Strauss, after years of studying human psychology and social dynamics, discovered that the most magnetic people in the world share certain behavioral patterns that go far beyond the superficial. These habits don't just make you more romantically attractive, they completely transform how people perceive you in every area of your life. Here's the truth nobody's told you. Being irresistible isn't about chasing people, it's about creating the conditions for them to naturally want to come closer to you. And it all starts with something that seems contradictory, but works like pure magic. The first habit that separates truly irresistible people is something that goes against everything we've been taught about getting what we want. It's about the power of strategic disinterest. But listen, I'm not talking about being indifferent or cruel. I'm talking about something much more sophisticated and powerful. Neil Strauss explained that the moment you stop desperately needing something is exactly when it becomes available to you. This isn't just a pretty phrase. It's a fundamental psychological principle that governs all our human interactions. People feel a natural attraction toward what they can't easily have, or toward those who don't seem to need their constant approval. Think about this for a moment. Have you ever noticed how when you really need something from someone, that person seems to pull away or become less available? But when you genuinely don't need anything, suddenly everyone wants to help you, spend time with you, or get to know you better. This isn't coincidence, it's basic human psychology. Strategic disinterest doesn't mean being unfriendly or distant. It means having a life so rich and full that you don't depend on any specific person to feel complete. When you operate from this place of internal abundance, you project a completely different energy. People feel it, even though they can't explain exactly what attracts them to you. Here's a practical exercise to start developing this habit today. For the next 3 days, in every social interaction you have, ask yourself internally, what do I need from this person? If you detect that there's something you're looking to get, approval, attention, validation, or anything else, consciously let go of that need. Instead of seeking to obtain something, focus simply on being present and enjoying the moment without a hidden agenda. You'll see immediate results. People will start perceiving something different about you, a genuine confidence that's magnetic. But this is only the first level, because there's something even deeper that irresistible people master. And we'll talk about that in the next point. The second habit that transforms your personal attractiveness is something most people do exactly backwards, which is why they get opposite results from what they're seeking. It's about selective authenticity. Now, before you think I'm suggesting you be fake, let me explain exactly what this means and why it's so powerful. Most people believe being authentic means showing absolutely everything about themselves from the first moment. They share their insecurities, reveal their deepest fears, talk about their personal problems, and basically open up completely believing this makes them more attractive. The result is exactly the opposite. Neil Strauss discovered that vulnerability is powerful, but it must be earned, not given away. The most magnetic people understand that authenticity doesn't mean absence of filters, but rather the ability to show genuine aspects of their personality gradually and appropriately for the context. Think about the people who have most intrigued you in your life, whether romantically or platonically. They probably weren't those who told you their complete life story in the first encounter, nor were they completely closed and impenetrable. They were those who gave you genuine glimpses of who they were, but in a way that left you wanting to know more. Selective authenticity has several dimensions. The first is temporal. You don't reveal everything about yourself at once. You share aspects of your personality, experiences, and thoughts gradually, allowing relationships to develop naturally over time. The second dimension is depth. You share real and genuine things about yourself, but you consciously choose when and with whom to share the deepest aspects of your life. Not out of manipulation, but because you understand that genuine intimacy must be earned and developed mutually. The third dimension, and perhaps the most important, is that you maintain a rich and interesting life that goes beyond any specific relationship. Magnetic people always have projects they're working on, interests they're exploring, goals they're pursuing. They don't define themselves completely by any individual relationship. Here's the key element most people don't understand. Mystery isn't about hiding who you are, but about living a life so full that new facets of your personality are naturally emerging. When you're constantly growing, learning, and experiencing, you naturally have new and interesting things to share. Here's the exercise to master this habit. Make a list of 5 genuine positive qualities you have. They could be your sense of humor, creativity, empathy, determination, whatever is real about you. Now, for the next 2 weeks, consciously focus on letting these qualities shine naturally in your interactions, without forcing them but also without hiding them. At the same time, resist the temptation to immediately share your insecurities, problems, or negative aspects of your life, especially with people you've just met. It's not about being perfect, but about allowing people to be attracted to your strengths before earning the right to know your more vulnerable aspects. The result of this approach is fascinating. People will start seeing you as someone confident, interesting, and with depth. And when you eventually choose to be vulnerable, it will have much greater impact, because you'll have first established a solid foundation of attractiveness. But mastering your personal presence is only part of the equation. There's a specific element about how you interact verbally with others that can exponentially multiply your attractiveness. And we'll talk about that in the next point. The third habit that separates magnetic people from forgettable ones is something we all do every day, but most do it in a way that makes them invisible instead of irresistible. It's about the art of magnetic conversation. I'm not referring to being the most talkative person in the room or having the best stories, but something much more subtle and powerful that Neil Strauss called the ability to make others feel fascinating. Here's the key most people never understand. People aren't attracted to you because of how interesting you are, but because of how interesting they feel when they're with you. This distinction changes everything. Neil Strauss observed that the most memorable people aren't necessarily those who talk the most, but those who listen best and ask the right questions. When someone leaves a conversation with you feeling understood, valued, and genuinely interesting, they'll want to experience that feeling again. Most people approach conversations trying to impress. They talk about their achievements, tell stories about themselves, try to demonstrate how smart or successful they are. The problem is, this makes the other person feel like a passive audience instead of an active participant, and that doesn't generate attraction. Magnetically attractive people do exactly the opposite. They approach conversations genuinely curious about the other person. They're not looking for their turn to talk, but are really interested in discovering what makes that person unique and interesting. But here's the trick. It's not just about asking superficial questions like what do you do or where are you from. It's about asking questions that invite the person to share aspects of themselves they rarely get to express. For example, instead of asking, do you like your job? You could ask, what excites you most about what you do? Or, how did you discover that was your thing? These questions invite much deeper and more revealing responses. Here's a powerful exercise to develop this skill. In your next conversation, set the goal of asking 3 questions that aren't about basic information, but about emotions, experiences, or perspectives. Questions like, what has surprised you most about yourself this year? Or what's the best advice you've received lately? But equally important is how you respond to what they tell you. Instead of immediately relating their response to your own experience, dig deeper into what they just shared. If someone tells you they love cooking, instead of saying, I like cooking too, you could say, what do you enjoy most about the cooking process? Or, what's the most ambitious dish you've tried to make? This technique has an almost magical effect. People leave conversations with you feeling heard in a way they rarely experience. They feel interesting, valued, and understood, and that feeling becomes directly associated with you. But here's something crucial many people overlook. If you really want this content to transform your life, you need to commit to applying it. So pause this video for a moment and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also hit the notification bell so you don't miss content like this that can completely change how you relate to others. The impact of mastering magnetic conversation goes beyond making people feel good around you. When you consistently make others feel fascinating and interesting, you develop a reputation. People will start describing you as someone who's easy to talk to, someone who really gets them, and they'll want to spend more time with you. But conversation is just one of the elements. There's something about your physical presence that can exponentially multiply everything we've talked about so far. And we'll talk about that in the next point. The fourth habit that transforms your attractiveness has to do with something you communicate without saying a single word, and it's more powerful than most people imagine. It's about developing an irresistible physical presence. And no, I'm not talking about having the perfect body or the most expensive clothes. I'm talking about something much more fundamental that has to do with how you occupy space and how you move through the world. Neil Strauss observed that the most attractive people don't need to announce their presence. You simply feel it when they enter a room. This magnetic presence can be developed and perfected, regardless of your body type, height, or current fitness level. Irresistible physical presence is composed of several elements that work together. First is your posture. I'm not referring to walking like a soldier, but to occupying your natural space with confidence. Imagine there's an invisible string pulling the top of your head upward, gently lengthening your spine. Your shoulders relax naturally, your chest opens without forcing it, and your head finds its natural position. Second is how you move. Magnetic people move with purpose and intention. There are no nervous movements, hurried gestures, or constant restlessness. Every movement is deliberate and fluid. When they walk, they do so at a constant, relaxed pace. When they gesture while speaking, their movements complement their words without distracting from them. Third, and this is crucial, is your relationship with personal space. Irresistible people respect others' space, but aren't afraid to occupy their own. They don't shrink or try to make themselves smaller so as not to bother anyone. They understand they have the right to exist fully in any space where they find themselves. Here's an element many overlook. The speed of your movements communicates your internal state. Hurried, nervous, or erratic movements communicate anxiety and insecurity. Excessively slow movements can communicate lack of energy or depression. Magnetic people find that optimal speed that communicates calm, confidence, and presence. Neil Strauss also talked about the importance of eye contact. It's not about staring at people, but about being able to maintain comfortable and natural eye contact during conversations. When someone is talking to you, your gaze is present with them. When you're speaking, you occasionally look at other parts but naturally return to connect with their eyes. But here's the most powerful element of all: the ability to be genuinely comfortable in your own body. The most magnetic people have developed a positive relationship with their physique, regardless of whether it meets traditional beauty standards. This comfort translates into a physical confidence that others find irresistibly attractive. Here's a transformative exercise to develop this presence. For the next 7 days, spend 5 minutes each morning standing in front of a mirror, simply observing your natural posture. Without judging, without criticizing, just observe. Then, very gently, adjust your posture until you feel you're occupying your complete space with dignity and confidence. Then, during the day, set random reminders on your phone every 2 hours. When the alarm sounds, take a moment to check your posture and physical presence. Are you slouching? Are you occupying your natural space? Are your movements fluid or tense? Without judging yourself, simply adjust and continue. Also practice the art of moving with intention. Instead of automatically walking from one place to another, be conscious of every step. Walk as if you had all the time in the world, even when you're in a hurry. This practice develops a physical presence that people notice immediately. The impact of developing magnetic physical presence is profound. People will start perceiving you as someone confident and comfortable in their own skin. This physical confidence translates into an attraction that goes beyond the words you say or the things you do. But there's a final element that ties everything we've discussed together and takes it to a completely different level. And we'll talk about that in the next point. The fifth and final habit is what separates simply attractive people from those who are absolutely magnetic and unforgettable. It's about calculated mystery. This is perhaps the most misunderstood concept when talking about personal attractiveness, because most people confuse it with being distant, cold, or manipulative. But true calculated mystery is something completely different and much more sophisticated. Neil Strauss explained that the most fascinating people are those who reveal enough of themselves to create connection, but maintain enough in reserve to keep curiosity alive. This isn't a formula for being evasive, but an art of sharing in a way that there's always more to discover. Think about the people who have most intrigued you in your life. They probably weren't those who told you their entire story in the first encounter, nor were they completely closed and impenetrable. They were those who gave you genuine glimpses of who they were, but in such a way that left you wanting to know more. Calculated mystery has several dimensions. The first is temporal. You don't reveal everything about yourself at once. You share aspects of your personality, experiences, and thoughts gradually, allowing relationships to develop naturally over time. The second dimension is depth. You share real and genuine things about yourself, but consciously choose when and with whom to share the deepest aspects of your life. Not out of manipulation, but because you understand that genuine intimacy must be earned and developed mutually. The third dimension, and perhaps the most important, is that you maintain a rich and interesting life that goes beyond any specific relationship. Magnetic people always have projects they're working on, interests they're exploring, goals they're pursuing. They don't define themselves completely by any individual relationship. Here's the key element most people don't understand. Mystery isn't about hiding who you are, but about living a life so full that new facets of your personality are naturally emerging. When you're constantly growing, learning, and experiencing, you naturally have new and interesting things to share. Neil Strauss also pointed out the importance of what he called strategic absences. It's not about playing games or being manipulative, but understanding that being always available to anyone diminishes your perceived value. When you have a full life, you're naturally not always available, and that natural scarcity increases the value of your time and attention. But here's a crucial distinction. This must be authentic. If you artificially create scarcity or pretend to be busy when you're not, people will feel it, and it will have the opposite effect. Calculated mystery works because it's the natural result of a genuinely rich and interesting life. Here's an exercise to develop this habit authentically. First, make a list of 5 things that genuinely interest you, but that you haven't fully explored. They could be skills you want to learn, places you want to visit, creative projects you want to undertake, whatever. Then commit to actively exploring one of these areas each month. Not to have something mysterious to talk about, but because it will genuinely enrich your life. When you have conversations with others, you'll naturally have fresh and interesting experiences to share. At the same time, practice the art of sharing in an intriguing way. Instead of telling complete stories all at once, learn to give glimpses that invite questions. For example, instead of telling the entire story of a trip you took, you could casually mention something interesting you experienced and see if the other person shows curiosity to know more. Also, establish natural limits on your availability, not because you're playing games, but because you really have important things in your life besides any specific relationship. When someone wants to spend time with you, sometimes you'll be able to, and sometimes you'll have other commitments. This natural variability is part of what maintains interest. The result of well-executed calculated mystery is that people find you consistently interesting and stimulating. They never feel they've completely figured you out, not because you're fake, but because you're a complex person with multiple dimensions that reveal themselves naturally over time. Now, we reach a crucial point. We're halfway through this transformative content, and I need to ask you something important. Are you really going to apply these habits, or are you just going to consume them passively as entertainment? The difference between people who transform their lives and those who stay the same is action. If this content is resonating with you, prove it by subscribing to the channel right now and activating notifications. It only takes 2 seconds, but it's the difference between being someone who learns and someone who applies. When these 5 habits combine, they create a powerful synergy. Strategic disinterest frees you from the need for approval. Selective authenticity allows you to be genuine while highlighting your best qualities. Magnetic conversation makes others feel fascinating around you. Irresistible physical presence communicates confidence without words. And calculated mystery keeps people intrigued and wanting to know more. But here's what really differentiates people who get extraordinary results. They understand that these habits aren't techniques you apply occasionally, but a way of being that you adopt completely. They become part of your identity, not something you do, but who you are. Neil Strauss observed that the most magnetic people in the world don't need to constantly remind themselves how to behave because these patterns have become automatic. They've integrated these habits so completely into their personality that they simply flow naturally from who they are. This is the level of mastery you should aspire to. You don't want to be someone who's constantly thinking about what technique to use or how to behave. You want these patterns to become so natural that you're simply magnetically attractive without conscious effort. But there's something important we need to address. Many people, when they learn about these principles, make the mistake of trying to apply them all at the same time. This usually results in forced and unnatural behavior that has the opposite effect to what's desired. The key is to develop these habits gradually, one at a time, until each becomes natural before focusing intensely on the next. Start with the one that most resonates with you or the one you feel needs the most work. Dedicate at least 2 weeks to consciously practicing that habit until it begins to feel more natural. For example, if you decide to start with strategic disinterest, spend 2 weeks focusing specifically on releasing the need for approval in your daily interactions. Once that begins to feel more natural, then you can consciously add work on your magnetic conversation and so on. It's also crucial to understand that these habits must be authentic to you. It's not about adopting a completely different personality, but about developing and refining aspects of who you already are. If you're naturally a more introverted person, your version of magnetic physical presence will be different from someone naturally extroverted, and that's perfectly fine. Authenticity is the foundation upon which all these habits must be built. If you try to force behaviors that are completely contrary to your nature, people will feel it as inauthentic. But if you take these principles and adapt them to your unique personality, the result will be magnetically attractive. Here's something else Neil Strauss emphasized. These habits aren't just for romantic attractiveness. They're fundamental principles of magnetic human presence that will improve all your relationships. They'll make you more effective in your career, more beloved by your friends, and more respected in any social context. When you develop these patterns, you don't just attract more romantic attention, but you attract better opportunities in general. People want to work with you, collaborate with you, and spend time with you because you project an irresistible energy of confidence, authenticity, and fascinating mystery. But there's a final element we need to discuss before concluding. These habits require a solid foundation of genuine self-esteem to function correctly. If you try to apply these techniques from a place of deep insecurity or desperate need, they won't work as they should. This means that parallel to developing these external habits, you also need to work on your relationship with yourself. You need to develop genuine appreciation for who you are, confidence based on your real values and achievements, and a life that's satisfying regardless of the attention you receive from others. This is perhaps the most important part of the entire process. External habits are powerful, but they must be rooted in solid self-esteem to be truly effective and sustainable long-term. Neil Strauss eventually realized that all the techniques in the world couldn't compensate for a fundamental lack of self-love and internal security. The most magnetic people have done the internal work necessary to be genuinely comfortable with who they are. This doesn't mean you have to be perfect or that you can't work on improving aspects of your life. It means your sense of worth doesn't depend completely on external validation, and you can be content with yourself even while working on personal growth. When these habits emerge from a foundation of genuine self-esteem, their power multiplies exponentially. People don't just find you attractive, but they feel an authenticity and confidence that is deeply magnetic. Now, let's talk about practical implementation. How do you take all this from theory to reality? How do you transform these concepts into real changes in your daily life? First, you need a specific plan. For the next 30 days, you're going to focus on implementing one of these habits each week. Week 1. Strategic disinterest. Week 2. Selective authenticity. Week 3. Magnetic conversation. Week 4. Physical presence. And calculated mystery will be something you develop naturally as the other 4 strengthen. For each week, establish a specific daily practice. For strategic disinterest, for example, you could commit to having at least one social interaction each day where you consciously release any agenda of getting something from the other person. Just practice being present without need. Keep a journal during this period. Each night, write briefly about your experiences practicing that week's habit. What did you notice? How did people react? What felt natural and what felt forced? This conscious reflection will accelerate your development. Also, find a practice partner. It could be a friend who's also interested in personal development, or even someone in your family who's willing to give you honest feedback about the changes they're noticing in your presence and behavior. But here's the most important key. Be patient with yourself. These habits can take months to fully develop, and that's perfectly fine. You're not looking for an overnight transformation, but sustainable development that will last a lifetime. There will be days when you feel like you're going backwards or when these behaviors feel unnatural. That's a normal part of the growth process. The key is consistency, not perfection. Also recognize that different habits will resonate more strongly with you than others. It's okay to put more energy into developing those that align more naturally with your personality, while still gradually working on the others. Neil Strauss spent years perfecting these principles, and even he would say that development never really ends. There are always deeper levels of mastery to achieve, more subtle ways to apply these concepts, and new aspects of your magnetic personality to discover. The goal isn't to reach some endpoint where you no longer need to grow, but to develop a trajectory of continuous improvement that makes you more magnetic, more authentic, and more irresistible each year than the previous one. It's also important to remember that these habits should be applied with integrity. Don't use them to manipulate or hurt others. True magnetic attractiveness comes from a place of positivity and generosity of spirit, not from a desire to control or take advantage of people. When you apply these principles from a place of genuine self-love and desire to authentically connect with others, they create deeper, more satisfying, and mutually beneficial relationships. When you apply them from a place of lack or manipulation, they can create superficial connections that eventually crumble. So, as you develop these habits, always keep your intention in mind. Are you looking to become more magnetic to create genuine and enriching connections? Or are you looking to manipulate others to get what you want? Your intention will shape both your application and your results. The most genuinely magnetic people truly enjoy connecting with others and find joy in making people feel valued and interesting. Their attractiveness emerges naturally from their desire to create positive experiences for everyone involved. Finally, remember that being irresistible isn't about everyone liking you. It's about being so authentically attractive that the right people feel naturally drawn to you, while people who aren't compatible with you filter themselves out naturally. When you truly master these habits, you won't just attract more attention, but you'll attract better attention. The people who feel attracted to you will be those who genuinely appreciate who you are and what you offer. This natural selectivity is actually one of the greatest advantages of developing authentic magnetic attractiveness. Instead of having to constantly filter through superficial or incompatible connections, you naturally attract people who have the potential to create deep and satisfying relationships with you. If you've made it this far in this content, you already know something important about yourself. You're committed to your personal growth. But committing to learning and committing to applying are two completely different things. Here's the truth. Most people who watch this video are going to feel inspired for a few days, maybe even try to apply one or two of these principles casually, but then they're going to return to their habitual patterns. Only a small percentage will actually do the consistent work necessary to integrate these habits into their life. Which group are you going to be in? Are you going to be someone who consumes this content as entertainment, or are you going to be someone who uses it as fuel for real transformation? The difference between these two types of people isn't talent, intelligence, or even circumstances. It's the conscious decision to prioritize their growth and stick with the practice even when it feels uncomfortable or unnatural. If you really want to transform your level of magnetic attractiveness, you need to do more than just understand these concepts intellectually. You need to incorporate them into your daily life until they become an automatic part of who you are. This requires what Neil Strauss called productive discomfort, the willingness to feel a little uncomfortable while developing new behavioral patterns, knowing that temporary discomfort will lead to lasting confidence and attractiveness. Most people avoid this discomfort, and that's why they never experience real transformation. But you don't have to be like most people. You can choose to do the work, feel the discomfort, and reap the extraordinary rewards that come with becoming a magnetically irresistible person. The next 30 days are going to pass regardless of what you do. You can spend that time the same as always, getting the same results you've always gotten, or you can use those 30 days to begin a transformation that will fundamentally change how people perceive and respond to you. The choice is yours, but you have to make it consciously, and you have to make it now, while the motivation and clarity from this content are fresh in your mind. Here's your challenge. For the next 30 days, you're going to implement these 5 habits systematically. You're not going to look for excuses. You're not going to let discomfort stop you. You're not going to wait until you feel ready, because the truth is nobody ever feels completely ready for personal growth. You're going to start where you are, with what you have, and you're going to take consistent steps toward becoming the most magnetic version of yourself. And in 30 days, you're going to look back and be amazed at how much you've grown. But here's what's most important. This doesn't end in 30 days. These 30 days are just the beginning of a lifestyle of continuous growth and development of your magnetic presence. They're going to establish the foundations for a transformation that will continue for years. The most attractive people in the world didn't get there by accident. They consciously developed the habits and patterns that make them irresistible. And now, you have exactly the same information and the same tools they used. The only difference between where you are now and where you want to be is consistent application of these principles for long enough that they become natural. Neil Strauss went from being someone who struggled socially to becoming one of the most magnetic people of his generation. Not because he had some special talent or natural advantage, but because he was willing to do the work necessary to develop these habits. If he could do it, so can you. If thousands of other people have used these principles to transform their personal attractiveness, so can you. There's nothing special about them that you don't have. The only real question is, how seriously are you going to take your own growth? Now here's what I need you to do to solidify this commitment to yourself. In the comments below, I want you to write exactly this. I choose to become the most magnetic and irresistible version of myself, and I commit to applying these 5 habits consistently for the next 30 days. Writing this declaration publicly does 2 important things. First, it solidifies your commitment to yourself. Second, it makes you publicly accountable, which dramatically increases the likelihood that you'll actually follow through. Don't skip this step. It's the difference between good intentions and real implementation. Take 30 seconds right now to write that declaration in the comments, and while you're there, make sure to give this video a thumbs up if it's provided you value. Likes tell YouTube that this content is useful and help it reach more people who can benefit from this information. Also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future content that can continue accelerating your personal growth. I regularly post videos that dive deeper into these topics and give you additional tools for your development. But more important than anything you do on YouTube is what you do in your real life. This knowledge only has power if you apply it. These habits can only transform your life if you actually practice them until they become natural. The most magnetic and irresistible version of yourself is waiting for you. It's not waiting for you to have more time, more resources, or perfect circumstances. It's waiting for you to make the decision to start where you are with what you have. That decision and the consistent actions that follow it is all that stands between where you are now and becoming magnetically irresistible. The time is now. Your transformation begins today.